I want you to picture this. You start a campaign. Character sheets are fresh, backstories are tangled in mystery, and session 1 is just magic. But by session 5, someone misses, and then another, and somebody reschedules, so on, so on. By session 7, you're rescheduling more than you're actually playing, and then nothing. There's no finale, no closure, just a dead Discord thread, a lingering sense that somehow you failed, that somehow this was your fault. This happens everywhere, in every system, and at every single table. Eventually, and also, and this is important for you to hear, it happens with every single game master. But it's not necessarily your fault. But you still do have to ask the question, right? What actually kills a campaign? And why does it always happen right there, around that session 7 mark? Or honestly, depending on how often you play, session 4. As I found both of them to be reasonable numbers for this type of concept, I started thinking about it. I wondered, is it a random number? No, it's not. It's like the edge of the cliff. The moment your campaign must shift from setup to escalation. If it doesn't, players drift, and stakes begin to feel fake. And the story then dissolves. Most campaigns do not die from burnout or from time, but because narrative inertia does not allow others to think about the story outside of simply sitting down and playing the game, which can absolutely kill the desire to play within a narrative. But you may be asking yourself, and this is, I feel, very reasonable to ask yourself, hey Jay, why are you a frog? Well, that is not a long story, but a story with many parts. And I'm going to try to sum it up as quickly as possible right now.
You see, we're doing renovations on my house, and you may have noticed that I have not posted a video in several months. Well, that's because of a lot of different reasons, not only because of the fact that my current recording studio is actually an absolute wreck, but also the fact that I have been through a lot of personal stuff over the past few months. And so I eventually decided that I was going to have to do recording in a different way with only voiceover, but I still wanted to represent myself on screen in one way or another, and so I started trying to figure out a way that I could do that. And so I started to go through a few different concepts. At first, I drew myself as a bird, and then I drew myself as a letter J because, my wife thought that was funny. And I went through so many concepts, and then I just kind of doodled myself as a frog.
And it felt so right. And so I completed it. And I showed it to my wife. She said, I like it. And it seems to be the favorite out of anything that I've done with anybody that I've shown it to. So now I'm a frog. I made the design myself. Because I think for the time being, I'm a frog.
I like frogs.
And it feels right. Anyways. Now, I want to make it clear, when people do not respect scheduling, that is an issue on personal respect. That is an issue with that individual, not necessarily just with your campaign. Just because people do not have the respect to actually understand and take into account the time that the GM and the other players are putting into a game does not mean you've done anything wrong. However, I have found that this issue does occur a lot more and a lot more often when the campaign does not stick in players' heads outside of the game itself. See, session 1 through 3 are about character intros and setting the table vibes. Here, the players meet their allies, identify with their roles, and begin to understand the tone of the campaign and the story that you're all going to tell together. Sessions 4 through 6, then, gently introduce threads, at least in my experience. And then they provide introductory missions and tease the broader lore. Now again, this does depend on how often you play, but in my experience for most games that I have played, this is generally true. 1 through 3, 4 through 6, but then session 7 happens. By session 7, there must be a critical shift into attitude. Without it, honestly, the narrative just stalls. There must be a shift into something broader happening, momentum beginning to occur. Consider this. You keep introducing NPCs, but you never resolve them. You keep seeding threats into your campaign, but you never trigger them. The campaign just begins to spin in circles, and the players, trust me, they feel it. Let's just bust a quick myth right here and now. An open world does not mean structure. It means multiple compelling paths, each clearly defined and enticing. Freedom without purpose is just wandering, and wandering will kill campaigns if you allow the players to do it without any sense that their wandering is going to get them somewhere. Here's the thing, most campaigns don't die because the story ended. They die because nobody knows how to care about the story. Now, again, I do want to reemphasize every single step of the way, people need to respect the time that's going to be put into the table, especially by the game master who is planning things specifically for their friends. However, it doesn't remove the fact that if people don't care, people do not invest, and therefore they do not put anything more into what is happening in the game than what is happening directly in front of them. The filler session is something that I think most GMs need to be aware of, specifically because of this concept. It's not always always intentional, I know that, but let's be clear, a filler session in the wrong state can take what was going to be a promising campaign and remove any investment the players had in it moving forward. Maybe it's just a casual shop and chat episode, or a night spent role-playing downtime. And on paper, that sounds fun. In fact, some of my favorite sessions I have ever played in any game ever have been these types of filler sessions. However, without meaningful stakes or character progression, it is lethal to the narrative that you are attempting to get everybody to invest into. These filler sessions cannot come until a break has been earned or is needed by the players. If a filler session comes before the players get the chance to do this, all they're doing is playing with characters who have yet to be fleshed out and have nothing to say during the downtime where they've been given the chance to say something. Again, it is basically poison to a narrative that is attempting to build momentum. The fun fades fast, and then the investment also begins to fade. But it's not the only type of thing that's going to do this to your campaign. In fact, there are many things that you must watch out for that will do this exact thing. There are other types of sessions, such as the fetch quest, or more specifically, the optional fetch quest. Tasks that feel unrelated or trivial kill urgency, and they happen all too often, way early in the campaign. And honestly, they will typically happen at a point where the players are looking for something to latch onto, and instead all they're given is a basic RPG fetch quest. Then they must ask themselves, why are we here? What's the point? They lose trust that their choices matter because there's nothing happening that they have actually impacted. A fetch quest does not imply that the characters have anything to impact within the world other than simply obtaining an item that probably would have been obtained by any other type of adventurer beforehand. And to be honest, that's also something that can happen on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, such as a spotlight episode or a session that nobody wanted. It feels like a good idea to do this. Trust me, I get it. Giving each player a moment feels like it should be a slam dunk as a game master. However, when players sense forced attention rather than natural development, it feels hollow. Imagine any time you've watched an anime where one of the side characters gets a spotlight episode that does nothing important and you don't even know why it happened in the first place. It feels like it was shoehorned in because the author liked the character, but not because it actually had a place within the narrative that was occurring. It makes you frustrated because it happened in the middle of another important arc and you'd rather focus on the important arc that's happening. They must feel natural and like they're earned, not forced. Remember this, when players can't join to what the campaign is about by session 7, it is so easy for a disengagement. Now this is a lot easier said than actually put into practice because TTRPGs are not anime or manga. Yes, we can give all of the criticism we want towards a specific episode or chapter to be given to a character we don't like, but when it comes to TTRPGs, the point is to share the spotlight. Everybody should be allowed to actually engage, and therefore sometimes the game master must put a spotlight on a player that wasn't really involved in the story so that they can then become involved. Do I understand that? Yes, of course. However, you should make sure to give the players the respect of understanding when it is time for their players and their characters to interact with the story. You should give them an in to the story itself and not just shove them in because they will feel just as awkward as anybody else at the table. You deserve to have your game paid attention to, but so do the players. They deserve to have the respect that is necessary to actually feel like their characters were added and included into the narrative, not forced into it. So, with all this in mind, what do you do when a campaign is dying? You don't need a miracle. Trust me, you just need to plan. Step number 1 is to trigger an escalation by session 6, or depending on your play rate, around the specific time where people have slowly started to get at least a little comfortable with their characters. The escalation must feel irreversible, a point of no return. This could be the villain's first trick, a sudden betrayal, or a loss of something the players care about deeply, or even just an event that shakes the world to its core, and while it's not directly related with the players, they now cannot ignore it because it has affected the world so fervently. But you do need to give them something to invest into and feel like they've lost because of it. You don't have to make it feel like they specifically lost a battle, but you do need to make it feel like they have lost something. Something has been taken away that they now must pursue or must do something about, otherwise they will never feel whole again. Step number 2 is to introduce the consequences early. From session 1, choices should always matter. Minor decisions have subtle repercussions, building anticipation. Players must see that their actions ripple outward meaningfully, and most importantly, by you paying attention to the small actions they take, it lets them know that you care about their characters and what they're doing. You care about the decisions that they're making. You pay attention as the game master, and that is extremely crucial to making your players feel invested in the story because you're invested in the story. Investment begets investment. In fact, there was one time I did this in one of my own campaigns where one of the players in session 1 slighted another character or NPC and put them in what was essentially their burn book.
It's our burn book. So we cut out girls' pictures from the yearbook, and then we wrote comments.
They had a book in which they would always make sure that any NPC who slighted them, they would eventually get revenge on. And so with them in that book, I would then make sure to seed that NPC who I never had any intentions of reintroducing throughout the campaign and multiple instances for this player character to mess with. This showed them that I was paying attention to what they're doing and I cared. Somebody could do something as little as possible for the sake of roleplay and I would pay attention and put it in. This let them know that I was invested and therefore made them want to investigate the world. They would always be looking out for that NPC. They'd be going out of their way to see if the NPC was there. They were invested in the story because I proved to them that I was invested in them. It is a reciprocal thing that goes a long way. Step number 3 is to map player arcs by session 3. You should know your character's personal stakes, and you do this by performing step number 2, watching their actions. And then, once you have watched their actions and understood them over the course of several sessions, you will then align their goals with narrative beats. Personal stories intertwined with the main arc feel engaging and urgent. You should always be looking for what things the players will do to make the main story more interesting, not how the main story will make the players more interesting. Always look at how to tie in the player character's actions. You may see one of the player characters do something that wasn't going to be a big part of the story, but now that they just did that, that is the exact opposite motivation that the main BBEG is going to have because it gives an interesting character foil. You might see that the fighter does something incredibly heroic, self-sacrificing, and now you want to make sure that the BBEG absolutely has the exact opposite worldview. Kindness does not beget kindness. Kindness invites weakness. Meanwhile, the fighter has the exact opposite worldview. Kindness begets strength. And now, fighter has a very emotional reason to care about the BBEG, not just a mechanical one. It is extremely crucial to do this to allow your players to feel like they have something to invest into and that the work they put into their characters is going to equally be important within the world that you have put work into. And then step number 4, know your campaign's core thesis. What's the story you're actually telling? If you can't clearly state this, neither can your players, and confusion creates apathy. Remember this, if sessions 1 through 6 are your prologue, session 7 is where the story truly begins. Plan accordingly with this concept. TTRPGs do not follow traditional act structures, meaning the 3-act structure. Act 1 is where you introduce the world and introduce a rising action. 2 happens just after Act 1, where suddenly something happens that can no longer be reversed, and the main characters are forced into the adventure and the story as a whole. Through Act 2, you should have a rising action and an introduction to the stakes, and more introduction to the world itself. And then once you've hit Act 3, that is where everything comes apart and the actual climax of the story begins. And the day you cause things to knock over that cannot be put back. Because of the way TTRPGs work, however, obviously this is not how everything is designed. However, that being said, you can still use this concept. If sessions 1 through 6 are your Act 1, then session 7 through whatever is going to be your main bad guy's introduction. It's going to be Act 2, and the final climax of the story is going to be Act 3. You can use this properly and then install the 3-act structure within each of the adventures that you run. Campaigns don't die all at once. They bleed out slowly, session by session, until no one remembers why they cared. The 3-act structure, though having to be pretty loose in order to fit within a TTRPG structure, really is how you can keep people invested. You give tension, you allow there to be time for investment, and then you break that investment in half with something that then causes the players to want to put it together, whether it is caring about an NPC, caring about a concept, or simply caring about their own characters whose worldviews are then challenged. Unless you give them a reason, a story, a single rising heartbeat to listen and follow, they're not going to care. They're not going to have a reason to keep pursuing forward. The truth is, players are looking to see a mirror of themselves within the world around them, and if you don't provide that, they don't have any reason to try and see themselves within the world, and therefore, they have no groundwork to actually hold on to. This is about sharing a part of ourselves and a part of them, and everybody has to work together to truly create something magical. So, drop a comment if your campaign is hovering around session 5 or 6. Are you planning to escalate? Is your Game Master planning to escalate? What's happening right now? Genuinely, I love reading your stories in the comments, and if you tell me right now, then we can all see in real time how different groups are handling this situation. Don't do it in a mean way, of course, but go ahead and let people know how you think their Game Master is doing. Communicate in the comments how you have found this concept and how you found to overcome it. I think it's genuinely a fascinating concept, and it is something that I really do believe a lot of us struggle with. With a few different changes, we can fix it. But I do want to do one last thing before we go. Throughout this entire video, I have made sure to describe over and over again the things that can ruin your campaign, that can kill them. It makes it sound like there's so many landmines that are just waiting to blow up the game that you love so much. But that's not true, because there is one final step that you could do to overcome all of this in the most effective way possible. Just talk with each other. Talk with your players and find out what they're excited about. Find out what they're not excited about. Talk with your game master and tell them what's causing you to be a little bit bored and what's really got your attention. Communication is the key in all of this, and it really will help overcome every single obstacle to create the best game possible. So go out into the world, make it your own. Never forget to play your role. And because of this new format, my wife isn't in the room with me when I'm recording. I am going to have her record her own call to action separately, and I will insert it in. And that means I don't know what she's going to say ahead of time. Oh God, maybe this is a bad idea.
Like and subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more content like this. And then comment the weirdest D&D encounter you've ever had at your table. And who was at fault for it? Was it the DM or a player?